you are totally flooded by extreme protectors, the knowledge that this isn't a permanent condition, that the clouds will part and the sun will shine again, that the protectors on both sides will relax and your two selves will emerge eventually, is very comforting and can keep panic from setting in. Once yourselves re-emerge, repair and reconnection are possible. People can tolerate a great deal of scary turbulence if they trust that smooth skies are just ahead. As we will discuss later, it's only when protectors come to permanently dominate interactions that relationships are doomed. Not only does the multiplicity perspective help you through the inevitable storms of couplehood, it can also deepen the intimacy you came together to achieve. One aspect of intimacy is the ability to be highly vulnerable with your partner and, while in that state, to receive love and acceptance from him. It is scary to reveal to anyone, but especially to your intimate other, aspects of your character that you view as weak, unsavory, or shameful. The 44. You are the one you've been waiting for. Fear is that once you expose those parts of you, you will be forever seen by that other as having those character flaws. If you both understand that those are just small parts of you, parts that carry burdens of worthlessness, insecurity, distorted sexual impulses, and so on, parts that simply need empathy and acceptance to heal, it's easier for you to reveal them and for your partner to respond lovingly. There is something magical about trusting that all of you is welcomed in a relationship. It's as if you are a single parent who feels ashamed of how ugly, stupid, or frail some of your children are and thinks they reflect badly on your genes and parenting. Then you find someone who not only accepts them but who also can see past their apparent deficits to their essential goodness and lovability. You feel an incredible connection to that person, based not only on relief at no longer having to hide your children from the world, but also on seeing how he makes them shine and how attached they are to him. When this process of vulnerability and acceptance is mutual, couples form such a secure connection that their protectors relax and their young parts know it is safe to pop out at any time. You may know a couple whose relationship seems full of lively spontaneity and creative playfulness. They literally bring out the best in each other because they each know that all their parts are welcome to step into the warm, safe space between them. Their interactions have the feel of an improv ensemble, with a wide variety of characters jumping excitedly onto the stage and playing off each other. Cultural constraints to intimacy, 45. Actually, you may have had trouble thinking of a couple you know like that. Unfortunately, such vibrant relationships are rare because without the multiplicity perspective and the knowledge of how to hold self-leadership, it is very difficult not to overreact to the extremes of some of your partner's parts. You resent her sloppiness because you think she wants you to do all the housework. She blows up at your nagging about cleanliness, assuming that you are a control freak. Your need to stay out of debt makes her think that you don't trust her judgment about money. Her cavalier attitude about spending leaves you with the impression that she doesn't care how hard you have to work to earn money. When your partner chronically acts in ways that bother you, your tendency is to 1. Assume that behavior represents a core personality trait that you're stuck with, and 2. Attribute a selfish or pathological motive to the behavior. Because of these monolithic attributions, you will be critical or contemptuous of your partner, and she will respond in kind. The result of processes like these is that each partner retreats behind walls of indifference or caution. The playful and loving parts that initially brought them together are bruised and now seem too vulnerable to reveal. The terrorism alert between them shifts from green to amber and, sometimes, even to red. Their interactions become stilted and predictable because only a few members of their respective inner tribes do the interacting, and those members don't trust each other. Many parts of each partner feel most unwelcome. Those parts will leave you with an 46. You are the one you've been waiting for. Underlying sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction and, at some point, will give up hope and begin to sabotage. The rest of this book is designed to help you avoid becoming an amber or red couple or, if you are already on high alert, help you get back to green. If you ever had a vibrant energy between you, you can get it back. Having a general knowledge about parts and self can help a great deal, and in the coming pages, I will embellish the framework we have developed so far and add exercises and techniques that can lighten the load your relationship carries. Exercise 1. Are you ashamed of the extreme thoughts and emotions you experience in your relationship? Do you worry that they are your true feelings? 2. Do you take the extreme things your partner says or does as representative of a core personality trait? If so, how does that affect the way you feel about the relationship? 3. What would change in your relationship if you trusted that all of the above came from small, burdened parts of you and your partner? Chapter 2. The Development and Power of Exiles. The Development and Power of Exiles, 49. The magical kitchen metaphor. Before we explore the development and power of exiles, I want to offer a way into understanding this material. Don Miguel Ruiz, 1999, uses the metaphor of the magical kitchen to describe intimate relationships. I will embellish his metaphor to illustrate what happens with our parts. Imagine that you inherited from your parents a magical kitchen in your home from which you can obtain any kind and quantity of food. Because your parents fed you unconditionally, you learn to do the same with your many children. They are happy because they love your food. Your food is so nourishing and satisfying that they never overeat or crave candy or other kinds of junk food. You never use food to punish or motivate them, consequently, they trust that they are worthy of being well fed just because they are your children. They don't fight because each one knows there is plenty of food for everyone. You also give freely to friends, neighbors, and those in need of food just for the pleasure of sharing. You know that you don't need to hoard because your food supply never runs out. Then one day a man knocks on your door and offers your children a steady supply of pizza and candy if they will take care of him emotionally. Because you and your kids are so full and you can see that he doesn't take good care of his own kids, your response is, "No, thank you, we have plenty of food of our own." On another day, a different man knocks. He is like you in that he has many children whom he feeds generously and who are 50. You are the one you've been waiting for. Happy and satisfied. He is attracted to the cuisine of your magical kitchen, but he doesn't need it because he likes to cook and has plenty of food of his own. His children love playing with yours and would like to live in your house, but because they know that he will care for them no matter what happens with you, they trust him to decide where to live. You invite him to share your home, and you love how much the two of you enjoy each other's cooking. Both sets of children relish the mixed cuisine that now comes from your kitchen. Now imagine that you live in a different household. You are very poor and have little food for your children. Because they are starving, the youngest and weakest of your kids cry all the time and beg you to find someone to feed them. Their desperation drives you crazy, and you lock them in the basement so that they aren't always in your hair and you're not always reminded of their suffering. That's the way your parents taught you to handle problem children. As hard as you try to ignore the sobs of those young ones, however, you can still hear them through the floorboards. The urgency of their need is like a constant gnawing in the back of your mind. Some of your older children lose trust in your ability to take care of the family. They take on adult-like responsibilities, prodding you to work harder, trying to contain or calm the ones in the basement, and searching for food. Because these older ones aren't equipped to handle this level of responsibility, they become rigid and controlling. They are constantly critical of your work. The Development and Power of Exiles, 51. Habits and performance, and they expend enormous amounts of energy trying to keep the basement children at bay. As the guy with the pizza and candy heads toward your door, the basement children smell the food before he arrives. They go insane with joy at the prospect of being fed and possibly released from their exile. They idolize the Candyman and are willing to do anything to please him. You and the older kids are hungry, exhausted, and impressed by how happy the Candyman makes the basement children feel. The possibility is very appealing of no longer having to deal with them and instead letting them attach to someone else. Consequently, despite some misgivings about the guy's demands and the poor quality of his food, you and the older children agree to satisfy his emotional needs in return for steady meals. He turns out to be abusive at times, but your younger kids fear starving and being returned to the basement. Also, while he is increasingly stingy with the pizza and candy, the younger kids are addicted to it. Every time you bring up the topic of throwing him out, they override you. Now imagine that the food in this story is really love, and the children are the different parts of you. If you identify with the first parent, who has the magical kitchen, you don't need to read the rest of this book. That's because when you love and accept your parts unconditionally, simply because they are in you, they won't be attracted by the false promises of certain other people. And when you find the right partner, your parts won't. 52. You are the one you've been waiting for. Be so dependent, demanding, protective, or easily hurt that they create constant dramas or make you tolerate abuse. Instead, they each will love your partner in their different ways, enriching your experience of intimacy, secure in the knowledge that if they are hurt by him, you are there for them and will deal with him. If you are like most people in this culture, however, you learned from parents and peers to exile certain parts of you. Therefore, the basement of your psyche is filled with love-starved, vulnerable inner children. Because they get so little from you, they will be obsessed with finding someone they imagine can rescue them and, out of their desperation, will blind you to that person's faults. So they are likely to make you pick Mr. Wrong and then, because they are so needy and vulnerable, will either make you stay with that person too long, will overreact to perceived hurts from him, or will try to control how close or distant he gets to you or to others. So where can you find the equivalent of a magical kitchen, a boundless fountain of love from which your parts can draw? It's in the last place you would ever think to look, yourself. But your parts have been convinced by messages from our culture and by the way you've treated them in the past that their only hope for finding the love they crave is in the outside world. Well-fed parts. This notion is not entirely a myth. Your parts can get a great deal from another person. But that is only possible if they. The development and power of exiles. 53. Already have a loving relationship with you. In this book, you will learn how to become the primary caretaker of your parts so that your partner can be their secondary caretaker. Many books on improving relationships contain some version of the truism that you can't really love another person until you love yourself. In most of those books, the idea of loving yourself is held up as an abstract ideal to strive for, or else you are given affirmations to repeat as a way to counter all your negative self-talk. In this book, you will find concrete ways to tap into the magical kitchen of yourself, which will allow you to love even your carping self-critics and your basement children. And you will find that, just as is true of well-fed children in the outside world, your inner characters will transform, they'll become lighter and happier when you feed, rather than starve through them. When that's the case, they will enhance rather than encumber your intimate relationships. Your partner will appreciate this arrangement because she won't feel the weight of your emotional dependence or the sting of your rage when she is unintentionally neglectful. Your parts will look first to you rather than her for their sustenance and for comfort when they are hurt. With this arrangement, they can stay calm and not panic when she distances, not fear being hurt when she gets close, and allow her to be who she is rather than make her into the image of the person they have been dreaming of. When she cries, shows fear, or otherwise acts like one of your vulnerable parts, you can lovingly comfort her because you know how to do. 54. You are the one you've been waiting for. That with those parts of you. When she is angry, you don't have to get defensive because you don't have a nasty inner critic that is agreeing with and amplifying her criticism of you. When she is shy, you don't begin to judge her since you are accepting of the shy part of you. In other words, because you can love all kinds of parts of you, you can love her even when she's acting like those parts. It's all connected. How you relate internally directly translates into how you relate externally and vice versa. Intimacy is often defined as the ability to reveal all aspects of oneself to another and feel accepted. Because you aren't ashamed or afraid of your vulnerable parts, you can expose them to your partner and experience the joy of being fully known and witnessed by another. When your partner is similarly vulnerable, you can be lovingly present with her but not feel as though you have to fix anything. You can have a relationship in which all parts are truly welcome, even when your partner distances or is angry. Your sensitive parts don't panic because they trust that whatever happens with her, they still have your love. When all that is the case, you will be able to bask in the radiance of your partner's love because you won't fear losing it or being engulfed by it. When life hurts or scares your parts, they have two sources of solace: yourself and your partner. When your partner acts like one of your parents and unhealed wounds make you feel horrible, you are able to speak for, rather than from, those wounded parts because they trust you to represent them well. Consequently, you communicate your hurt with clarity. The development and power of exiles, 55. And respect, without the blaming or pouting that commonly typifies such interactions. In turn, your partner is able to act in a compassionate manner, which helps your parts revise their beliefs about intimate relationships and unload the pain they carry from the past. In this way, your partner can help you heal without carrying the heavy load of being your healer. How exiles develop: because our exiles and the parts that protect them have such power over our ability to be close to our partners, we will explore in some detail how exiles develop and why they have such power in our relationships. Everyone is born with vulnerable parts. Most of us, however, learn early, through interactions with caretakers or through traumatic experiences, that being vulnerable is not safe. As a consequence, we lock those childlike parts away inside and make them the inner exiles of our personalities. On the other hand, some people are lucky enough to have caretakers who react to their vulnerability with love, patience, tenderness, and nurturance. If that was true for you, you don't have as many exiles. Because your parents accepted and embraced you when those sensitive parts of you were present, you learn to relate to those parts in the same way, with acceptance and love. To give an example, Jerry grew up with a learning disorder. His older brother was a good student who was lavishly praised at home and at school for his grades. Out of his hurt and 56, you are the one you've been waiting for. Frustration, Jerry was often whiny, clingy, and demanding of his mother's attention. Rather than criticize or punish him for acting that way, Jerry's parents were able to see the pain that drove his immature behavior. While they set limits at times when his hurt part was expressing itself in that indirect, demanding way, they kept their hearts open, even while being firm. More importantly, they created relationships with him in which he felt safe to tell them about feeling like a failure and a loser. Rather than trying to convince Jerry that he was better than his brother in other areas or telling him to think about the positive things in his life, his father was able to just listen to his pain and show Jerry that he loved him no matter how he performed. Because his parents related to Jerry's hurt part with such compassion, patience, and love, whenever Jerry felt bad because he couldn't read the way everyone else could, he would comfort that hurt part of himself in the same way, that is, he would listen to the pain and give it love. As a result, that young, vulnerable, childlike part felt securely connected to him and, when it wasn't hurt, continuously provided Jerry with a sense of wonder about the world and a delightful playfulness. If Jerry's parents had instead reacted the way many parents do to such babyish behavior, with criticism and impatience, when Jerry sensed the hurt, he would have criticized himself and banished his hurt to an inner basement. As an adult, Jerry would have wound up cut off from that wonder and playfulness, and would be dominated by critical and impatient parts, his. The development and power of exiles, 57. Managers. He would have become one of those insensitive and emotionally unavailable men women complain about who are afraid of and removed from all feelings except anger and cynicism. Since manager-dominated people don't experience much connectedness, his partner would have complained of feeling objectified, as though his only interests were sex and making himself look good. In addition, he would have a chronic dull ache in the pit of his stomach coming from that exiled part, which would become the background music of his life. His protectors would find ways to anesthetize or distract him from the ache such that if you asked how he was doing, most of the time he'd say fine and would mean it. The exception to fine would occur when something in the outside world, a small slight or failure, touched that open sore. At those times, it would feel as though his gut exploded with flames of pain as he was pulled back into the morass of stored humiliations from his childhood. Even though Jerry wouldn't be consciously aware of it, that chronic ache and the possibility of it exploding would become a major organizing force in his life. He might become a workaholic, striving constantly to distract from the ache, achieve enough to prove he wasn't a failure, and become attractive enough that no one would reject him. If he did fail at something, he might go on a drinking binge to douse the flames of emotion erupting from his gut. And, most relevant to this book, he would expect the mate he found to heal or redeem him, to eliminate that throbbing ache. 58. You are the one you've been waiting for. 3 ways parts are exiled for most of us. Intimacy problems are driven by a background ache, sense of emptiness, or pool of shame. When, as children, our parts were upset and consequently became extreme in one way or another, selfish, shy, agitated, tantruming, demanding, hitting, acting out sexually, fearful, and so on, we triggered parts of our parents because they had no patience for those same parts in themselves. So our parents reacted to us with criticism, rage, withdrawal of affection, and harsh punishments. Maybe that wasn't always their reaction, but they did it often enough to make us fear, loathe, and exile those parts of us. Consequently, when you were hurt, needy, pouty, demanding, tantruming, or crying, it would trigger your parent to react in an extreme way rather than with the warm nurturance or calm limit setting that your parts needed. Perhaps your father disdained his own vulnerability as effeminate and consequently shamed you for yours. Or your mother so needed you to care for her that she gave you the message that you couldn't have needs of your own. Suppose, in addition, that as you grew up, your peers humiliated you when you were open and spontaneous, and that when you told your parents or friends of that humiliation, they told you to get over it, to forget about it. Our exiles are often our most sensitive parts because they are the ones most hurt by the rejections, humiliations, traumas, and abandonments of our harsh environment and, while in their state of hurt or need, the parts that most trigger the people around us. The development and power of exiles, 59. Perhaps, however, it wasn't just when your young parts were upset and extreme that they were punished. Many families have unspoken rules against certain kinds of expressions such that a child's simple natural exuberance, sexuality, or assertiveness is labeled as showing off, selfish, disgusting, and sinful. To survive in such a family, you adopted your family's attitude toward those parts of you and exiled them, too. From those kinds of experiences, many of us learn to disdain, stifle, and try to eliminate not only our neediness and vulnerability but also our liveliness. We locked away our vitality, passion, sensuality, and courage because those qualities threatened someone we depended on. I have worked with many clients who were told by their family that they were too much and who had playfulness and daring shamed out of them. There are 3 primary reasons you wound up exiling your most precious aspects. 1. Your vulnerability, in its natural, innocent state, bothered your caretakers or peers. This happened if one or both of your parents were depressed or in conflict with each other such that there was no room for your neediness and, instead, you had to worry about and care for them. Neglectfully preoccupied such that you had to raise yourself and/or your siblings, using you as a surrogate spouse or living vicariously through your achievements. 60. You are the one you've been waiting for. Convinced that you had to be tough to survive or highly competitive to succeed, afraid or disdainful of their own neediness and, consequently, were verbally or physically abusive. It also happened if your peer group was focused on being cool, tough, or competitive. 2. Your natural vitality disturbed your caretakers or peers. This happened if one or both of your parents were adherents of a rigid religious tradition that viewed various natural expressions as sinful, afraid to let you grow up and leave them because of being highly dependent on you, survivors of sexual or physical abuse such that any sexuality or aggression in you was threatening, violent with each other, or sexually acting out such that you became afraid of assertiveness or sexuality, afraid of their own vitality, and consequently, were verbally or physically abusive when you showed liveliness, convinced that in order to attract a partner, you needed to be submissive or non-threatening. It also happened if your peer or sibling group was highly aggressive or demeaning such that you retreated from the fray. The development and power of exiles, 61. 3. Your vulnerable or lively parts were hurt, became extreme because of the hurt, and then triggered other people or disturbed you. This happened when you were, to give a few examples from my clinical work, displaced by the birth of a sibling, so you pouted and tantrumed, and then were severely scolded. Secretly sexually molested by an uncle, so you began acting out sexually with other children and were harshly punished. Attacked by a bully at school, felt as though you never wanted to leave the house, and locked up the fear so you could return to school. Shocked by the sudden death of a parent, wanted to collapse with grief and never get out of bed, and locked away the grief so you could function. When exiling happens for the first two reasons, exiles will feel rejected and unlovable. Because of our culture's beliefs about gender, the first kind of exiling happens more often with boys and the second with girls. The third kind happens to both genders. When exiling happens for the third reason, exiles experience insult added to injury. They carry the memories, sensations, beliefs, and emotions of the hurtful experiences. Then they are rejected by others as well as by us. 62. You are the one you've been waiting for. Exercise 1. How did your parents or family react to you when you were vulnerable? When you were lively? When you were hurt and, consequently, were extreme? 2. How did their reactions affect the way you learned to relate to those parts of you? We bury our joy. Our exiles are a buried treasure that, because they are in a state of tremendous pain and need, we experience as toxic waste and remain convinced that if we get near them we will be contaminated. Everyone around us agrees that we shouldn't go there and instead should just get over it and not look back. This is because no one understands that what is toxic are the emotions and beliefs the exiles carry, their burdens, not the exiled parts themselves. On the contrary, those parts are the vulnerability, sensitivity, playfulness, creativity, and spontaneity that are the heart of intimacy. How can we expect to enjoy our partner when we've buried our joy? When relationships seem bland and tasteless, each partner blames the other without realizing that they both forgot where they hid the spice. So the exiling of a vulnerable part is akin to first shaming a child and then locking him in a dark dungeon. A young boy in that situation feels terrible, rejected and abandoned, scared and needy, unlovable, and desperate for redemption. That's exactly how many exiled childlike parts of us feel. The development and power of exiles, 63. The power of exiles. The parts we exile exert far more control over us than an imprisoned boy could over the people who locked him up. Unlike the imprisoned boy, when these exiles are hurt by something that happens in our lives, they have the power to pull us into their despair. We become them, suddenly swallowed up by their pain and shame in terrifying ways. Author Elizabeth Gilbert, 2006, tells how her exiles began taking over when her boyfriend, David, began rejecting her. She captures well the hell we enter while in this state. When our exiles hijack us this powerfully, they often trigger surprise and then revulsion in our partners, which is the opposite of what the exiles want and which compounds their sense of rejection. I came to fear nighttime like it was a torturer's cellar. I would lie there beside David's beautiful, inaccessible sleeping body and I would spin into a panic of loneliness and meticulously detailed suicidal thoughts. Every part of my body pained me. I felt like I was some kind of primitive spring-loaded machine, placed under far more tension than it had ever been built to sustain, about to blast apart at great danger to anyone standing nearby. I imagined my body parts flying off my torso in order to escape the volcanic core of unhappiness that had become me. Most mornings David would wake to find me sleeping fitfully on the floor beside his bed, huddled on a pile of bathroom towels, like a dog. Page 21. 64. You are the one you've been waiting for. As this happened with David, Elizabeth became increasingly desperate. In Elizabeth's final sentence lies yet another component of the intractable vicious cycle that begins when exiles hijack. You come to hate the fact that you are acting so weak and clinging, and can see what it's doing to your partner, yet you can't stop yourself. Your inner critics frantically try to shame you out of it and try to lock up your exiles again, which only makes your exiles feel worse about themselves and more desperate, so they take over more. It's likely that David, like many men, hated his own needy exiles, so when he saw Elizabeth acting that way, he reacted to her the same way he reacted to his own, with distance and contempt. Internal Family Systems, IFS, therapist Mona Barbera, 2008, offers another example of this process in her valuable I was despondent and dependent, needing more care than an armful of premature infant triplets. His withdrawal only made me more needy, and my neediness only advanced his withdrawals, until soon he was retreating under fire of my weeping pleas of, "Where are you going? What happened to us?" The object of your adoration has now become repulsed by you. He looks at you like you're someone he's never met before, much less someone he once loved with high passion. The irony is, you can hardly blame him. I mean, check yourself out. You're a pathetic mess, unrecognizable even to your own eyes. Pages 20 to 21. The Development and Power of Exiles, 65. Book Bring Yourself to Love. She describes a time when she had been trying to get her husband, Monk, to go with her to a couples workshop and he refused. I started to lose my relaxed feeling and get tense. Suddenly I was 12 years old, sitting at the dinner table, with Mom on my left, Dad on my right, and Sister Lana directly across. There was a bowl of creamy, homemade tomato soup in front of me, and I wasn't eating it. Mom asked why, and I said I didn't like it. Her face seemed to work for a second or two, and then she erupted out of her chair, yelling, "You are an ungrateful, hurtful, hateful child. I can never please you," and pounded up the stairs to her room. We all knew from experience that she wouldn't be down for 3 days, and it didn't matter if we knocked or pleaded or said we were sorry. As I sat at that table with my sister and father, I kept very still on the outside so I wouldn't upset anyone anymore. On the inside, a shield was forming around my gut feelings so that I wouldn't know what they were, and I wouldn't get hurt from expressing them. When Monk said, "I don't want to do a couples workshop," he triggered this 12-year-old part of me. It was as though I were a child, back with my family. All I could hear in my head was, "He doesn't ever care about my needs. It doesn't matter what I want." I didn't know this was only part of me because its reality was consuming me. I couldn't notice the hurt 12-year-old, and I couldn't be there for her. I didn't show the hurt to Monk. Instead, angry parts immediately came out to accuse my husband of not caring and not being fair. And, of course, my angry parts stimulated his angry, attacking parts. 66. You are the one you've been waiting for. As Mona found, these exiles are frozen in time during scenes we want to forget. When triggered, some of us react the way Elizabeth did, becoming overwhelmed and showing our partner our hurt and neediness. Others of us are more like Mona, feeling the exile's excruciating pain inside but never letting our partner see it. Instead, we lead with an explosively angry protector, bewildering our partner with the intensity of our reaction. It's likely that Mona's unprovoked, out-of-the-blue eruption scared a comparable exile in Monk that took him to an equally dark place in his past and fueled his protective retaliation. This is how fights escalate with couples. Their protectors hurt their vulnerable exiles, thrusting them each into the past and engendering ever more extreme protection and hurt. In addition, when exiles are not triggered and instead exist in us as a chronic background ache, they still powerfully, although unconsciously, influence many aspects of our lives, including our choice of intimate partner, our ability to be patient during the search for that partner, and the degree to which we cling to, try to control, protect ourselves from, are hurt by, and are dissatisfied with that partner. In other words, our exiles and their protectors determine everything about our success and failure with intimacy. Your exiles suffered a double whammy. First, they were rejected, shamed, or abandoned by someone you relied on to love you, and then you rejected, shamed, and abandoned them. As a result, they are often desperate to be loved yet also desperately afraid that they will lose any love they get or convinced they don't. The development and power of exiles, 67. Deserve any. As I said earlier, in their exiled state, they seem less like buried treasure than toxic waste that will contaminate everything if you let it out. While in that state, these exiles can wreak havoc on your relationships. So it makes sense for everyone to tell you not to go there. It takes a leap of faith to get close to your exiles. You have to trust that they are more than they seem and that they can transform into valuable qualities. One goal of this book is to convince you that while your exiles are destructive to your relationships, they are only that way because they have been exiled and carry burdens from your past. Once you learn to love and care for them yourself, they will become the very qualities that make relationships sparkle. Exercise 1. How do you feel toward your exiles? How do you treat them? 2. How often do they take over in your relationship? Where in the past do they take you? 3. How would things be different if you were able to care for them effectively? Finding and healing exiles, because Mona knew about parts and how to find them inside. Later she was able to find and comfort that miserable teenage part and then reconnect with Monk. 68. You are the one you've been waiting for. It's likely that Mona's 12-year-old had initially been drawn to Monk, because he seemed to be a man who would care for her in the way Mona's father hadn't in that earlier scene and others. Each time Monk refused an important request, that exiled part's bubble of hope burst. Monk is no different from Dad. I thought I was saved, but I'm still trapped back there, unprotected from my crazy mom. If Mona can continue to show the exiled part that she can protect and care for it, it won't project all those expectations onto Monk and will no longer live in the past. Instead, Monk will be the beneficiary of that secure inner teen's irreverent sense of humor and cleverness. The other aspect of Mona's account I want to underscore is that she used the fight with Monk to find and heal a key exile in herself. When partners can do this, they come to trust that. Several hours later, on a dirt road outside a restaurant, I was finally able to recognize the hurt 12-year-old within me. I met her where she felt trapped and isolated in that dining room. I felt her relax with my presence and my acknowledgement of her world. I was doing for her what no one else had done, noticing her pain. I emerged out of my narrow self-focus and saw Monk standing there in the dark, his shoulders tense and his face blank and hard. He was in pain, too. I took a deep breath, gave up my angry attitude, and said, I must have hurt you very much for you to be acting this way. His shoulders dropped and his face softened into its familiar contours. I felt my own tension go away, and I felt a rich, warm, grounded feeling in my center, our connection. The development and power of exiles, 69. Such disconnecting episodes, as uncomfortable as they are, can be tremendously valuable opportunities to heal in ways that will serve the relationship in the future. For that to be the case, however, both partners must commit to the counterintuitive process of looking inside to change things when they are hurt by the other. Extreme beliefs about relationships like Mona's 12-year-old, exiles feel orphaned and rejected. They are desperate to be rescued from their wretched state and to be loved and healed. This alone means that exiles will powerfully influence your ability to be intimate. In addition, however, exiles carry a variety of extreme beliefs about what love is, whether they are worthy of it, who they must get it from, and whether it will last. Often they acquired these beliefs from experiences with caretakers during your younger years, but their extreme beliefs may also come from being burned later in life. What love is. Many of my clients never or rarely experienced love from their parents. Instead, because of their parents' parts, the clients were objectified in some way as children. For example, if your father needed you to take care of him emotionally, he only valued the parts of you that could do that, caretaking, achieving, or sexual parts, and you had to exile your own vulnerability. To those exiles, love means taking on the overwhelming responsibility of trying futilely to take care of someone. If you were objectified in a sexual way by a parent, you 70, you are the one you've been waiting for. We'll have exiles that believe love means danger and humiliation. If your mother couldn't stand for you to leave her, love means sacrificing all your hopes and ambitions for another person. The point here is that many of our exiles are in a bind. They crave being loved, but are convinced that love involves a great price. I have worked with many clients who, when they finally got close to a childlike exile, found that it was terrified or shut down. The part could not even trust the love of the self. It took many sessions in which my client was gently present with no pressure before the exile began to respond even slightly to the self's love. Imagine how having such a scared and raw basement child, who thinks of love as engulfing or perilous, would impact your ability to be intimate with someone. Unlovability and survival terror. In addition to having fears about love, most exiles also believe they are worthless or unlovable. If this is true of yours, it is usually because somehow they got that message from one or both of your parents. That message is terrifying to a child. The scariest message a child can receive is that he or she is not valued by a caretaker. There are good evolutionary reasons for children to be born with such a strong fear of not being valued and an equally strong need for approval. For much of our species' existence, most children didn't survive infancy, partly due to illness or labor complications, but also due to neglect or abuse. Even now, 30 million children die each year before age 5. Human infants are high-maintenance organisms. They require constant attention and the development and power of exiles, 71. Effort, remaining dependent on caretakers for an extraordinarily long period relative to other animals. Today, in many parts of the world, if a family's resources are low, a young child's survival will depend on how much they value him or her. Disapproval can equal death. Consequently, children are born with an overriding desire to be valued and an intense terror when they sense they aren't. If your caretakers seem to like you, you might make it; if not, you may be doomed. These early survival fears abate when a child receives consistently positive messages about his or her worth and the safety of the environment. A well-nurtured child can ease into the world as if stepping into a warm bath. The parts of the child's personality designed to ensure survival relax and allow the child access to a rich inner life filled with wonderful sensations and resources. The more a child is able to intuit this inner realm, the more secure the child feels because, in addition to having access to more creative, adventurous, and playful parts, he or she will sense the self, who he or she really is behind all the fear. Children get the message that they are unlovable in 3 different ways. The first 2 happen when parents objectify their kids, view them as something other than who they are. Some parents objectify by conveying that their child is very valuable, even essential, but only in a certain role. Such parents treat their children as surrogate spouses, confidants, or lovers, trophies whose performance or appearance should enhance the parents' egos, sources of entertainment or distraction, saviors of their 72. You are the one you've been waiting for. Tenuous marriages, or allies against their enemy spouse. Children of those parents get the message that who they are is not valuable, but that the role they are in is extremely valuable. Such children are in a confusing bind. They are often lavished with attention, special privileges, and praise. They come to feel extremely grateful and loyal to their parents. So why do they feel so worthless? Children in the second group aren't confused at all about why they feel bad. Their parents objectified them as unwanted burdens that have ruined their lives, scapegoats for their own failings, targets of their displaced rage, or sex toys to be used and discarded. Often, these children not only carry the embedded message from the parent that they aren't valued, but they also blame themselves for creating the parent's behavior. They ask themselves, why would my mother be that way if there wasn't something wrong with me, and conclude that there must be something wrong with them. At least the children in the first group know that if they continue to play their role, they will survive. Children in the second group search desperately for a way to please but never can, or they give up and put a protective wall around their hearts. Consequently, their survival terror and sense of doom are pervasive. The third way children get the message from parents that they aren't valued is by accident. It's so easy for a child to misinterpret events and blame herself. A child's parents divorce, and she assumes she must have done something wrong for her. The development and power of exiles, 73. Father to leave her. Her sister excels in school and gets lots of praise, and she concludes that she's not as valuable as her sister. Her brother has a chronic illness requiring a great deal of their parents' attention, and she feels abandoned and less important than him. When she hits pre-adolescence and starts to develop, her father suddenly stops hugging her, and she assumes that she did something bad. Unless parents are exquisitely sensitive to, and able to closely monitor and address, each child's reaction to family changes or traumas, it is inevitable that children will accumulate a sense of worthlessness to some degree. How does your exile's sense of unlovability affect your relationships? Of course, if you believe at your core that you are unlovable, you will have tremendous fear of having that confirmed by being rejected. As a result, some people don't take the risks necessary to find a good partner, keeping a distance from whoever tries to get close for fear that the other will see how vile they are. Other people become narcissists, constantly trying to fill their bottomless pit of worthlessness with the attention or accolades of others. The drive for redemption. One other consequence of feeling unlovable deserves a fuller exploration because it is so pervasive and powerful. With the burden of unlovability comes not only survival terror, as mentioned earlier, but also an intense drive to be redeemed, to have the caretaker who originally gave you the message that you are unlovable change his mind and tell. 74. You are the one you've been waiting for. You that he does indeed value you. This drive for redemption will be a major factor in your choice of mate because you will seek someone who looks, sounds, or acts like the original redeemer. You will be strongly drawn to someone who has certain similarities to one of your parents, if that person was the original redeemer. As you search for a partner, you will feel a big, intoxicating charge for certain people. If you follow that infatuated feeling inside to its source, it's likely that you will find one of those basement children in a state of ecstasy at the prospect of finally being redeemed and cared for in the way it has longed for. That particular person has become the exile's designated rescuer/nurturer/redeemer. The exile believes that if you can get that particular person to love you, it will prove that you aren't so unlovable after all. It will be as if your mother changed her mind and now finds you adorable, or your father not only stops viewing you as a failure but instead is very proud of you. The exile believes it will finally get the love and security it craved from one or both parents and will be pulled from the pool of shame and worthlessness in which it has been drowning. Consider my client Tina, an attractive 32-year-old veteran of the dating scene who came to me asking, "Why am I only attracted to assholes? Why can't I go for guys who respect me and treat me well?" After several sessions, Tina found an exiled part, an 8-year-old girl who was stuck in the past at a time when her father, whom she had earlier described as a demanding narcissist, was continually ignoring her attempts to get him to play. The development and power of exiles, 75. With her, he was rarely home, and the little time he spent there was consumed with work or playing ball with her older brother. This younger version of Tina felt invisible to him, as though she didn't exist in his eyes. The little girl was staring desolately at her father as he played with her brother, waiting for him to notice her. As she watched that scene from her past, Tina teared up and said she felt sad for that poor, ignored little girl. I asked Tina to enter that scene and be there with the little girl in the way she had needed someone to be at the time. Tina said she approached the girl and tried to get her attention, but the girl ignored